The fastest gunfighter in Dodge City just got killed by a slower draw. Distance, 4 feet. Time, less than 1 second. The physics of why this happened will destroy everything Hollywood taught you about gunfighting. The distance that mattered. Everyone knows the Hollywood version. Two gunfighters facing each other at 20 paces, hands hovering over their holsters, waiting for high noon. Quick draw wins. Fastest gun lives. Historian Richard Schenkman spent 15 years analyzing actual gunfight records from the Kansas cattle towns between 1870 and 1885. He documented 219 actual shootings where reliable witness testimony existed. The results shatter the Hollywood myth completely. 68 gunfights happened at contact distance, 0 to 3 feet. That's 31%. 91 more happened between 3 and 6 feet, another 42%. Only 17 gunfights, a mere 8%, happened at the classic Hollywood distance of 15 feet or more. Think about what that means. Almost 3/4 of actual gunfights happened within the distance of a poker table. Not across dusty streets, inside saloons, around card games, in close quarters where men lived and worked and got angry enough to kill each other. And at that distance, the fastest draw in the world didn't matter. Because speed becomes irrelevant when the fight is decided before either gun clears leather. Why speed stops mattering? Here's the brutal physics that nobody talks about. A trained man can cross 3 feet in roughly 1/3 of a second. That's been tested thousands of times in modern law enforcement training. It's called the reactionary gap, and it's a hard physical limitation of human movement. The fastest hip draw ever recorded under controlled conditions was 0.145 seconds by Bob Munden in 2006. That's an exhibition shooter with perfect conditions, no stress, no someone trying to kill him. A realistic combat draw by even a skilled gunfighter takes 0.3 to 0.4 seconds. Do the math. At 3 feet, even if you're impossibly fast, you have maybe 1/10 of a second between completing your draw and getting hit by a charging opponent. That's not enough time to aim. It's barely enough time to pull the trigger and hope. But the cross draw changes this equation completely, and the reason why is pure geometry. When you draw from a hip holster, your gun travels down, then up, then rotates forward. For the first 0.2 seconds of that draw, your muzzle points at the ground or your own leg. You literally cannot fire an effective shot until the entire draw motion completes at 0.3 or 0.4 seconds. The cross draw is different. Your gun sits on your left hip with the grip angled forward. When you draw with your right hand, you pull across your body. By the halfway point of this motion, around 0.25 seconds, your gun is already at your center line with the muzzle pointing forward. You can fire right then, before the draw even completes. That's the secret. The cross draw doesn't need to finish to be deadly. You can shoot effectively at 0.25 seconds into a 0.5 second draw. The hip draw can't shoot effectively until 0.35 seconds into a 0.3 second draw. At conversation distance, that difference decides who dies. The body shield. Nobody understood. There's another advantage to the cross draw that only becomes clear when you understand what happens during actual close-range violence. When someone attacks you at 3 feet, they're not standing still waiting for you to draw. They're moving, lunging, grabbing, trying to close distance or seize your weapon. During a hip draw, your gun hand moves down and away from your center line. Your right side is completely exposed. If an attacker grabs for you or rushes you, there's nothing between you and them except empty space. Your drawing motion offers zero defensive value. The cross draw is the opposite. Your arm sweeps across your torso, creating a physical barrier. Your forearm, your weapon, the motion itself all position between you and the attacker. If they lunge during your draw, they run into your defensive arm and your gun. Wild Bill Hickok survived multiple close-range attacks specifically because of this. The most documented case happened in Hays City in 1869. A drunk named Samuel Strawhun kicked open a saloon door with his gun already drawn, screaming he'd kill Hickok. The distance was about 4 feet. Hickok was sitting at a table. He started his cross draw while standing up. Strawhun fired and missed. Strawhun rushed forward and grabbed for Hickok's gun, but he caught Hickok's arm instead because the cross-draw motion put the arm between them. Hickok fired through his own coat. The bullet entered Strawhun's mouth and killed him instantly. If Hickok had used a hip holster, his gun would have been on his side, easily grabbed or blocked. The cross-draw motion itself became his defense. The drawing technique saved his life before the gun even fired. The seated execution. The cross-draw's advantages multiply dramatically when you're sitting down, and most frontier violence happened with at least one person seated. Gambling, drinking, eating, working at a desk, these were when tensions erupted into killing. Analysis of 34 documented gunfights where someone was seated shows the advantage starkly. Cross-draw users survived 27 out of 34 encounters, a 79% survival rate. Hip-draw users survived 6 out of 32 encounters, only 19%. The reason is simple biomechanics. When you're seated with a hip holster, the holster is trapped under you or pressed against the chair back. You cannot draw without standing up or twisting violently sideways. That adds half a second to a full second to your draw time. At close range, that delay is fatal. The cross-draw sits forward of your hip, completely accessible while seated. You don't shift position. You don't telegraph intention. Your draw time is unchanged. You can shoot effectively while the hip draw user is still trying to stand up. The Long Branch saloon fight in Dodge City, 1879, demonstrated this brutally. 5 men playing poker when an argument turned violent. 2 men carried hip holsters, 3 used cross-draw. When the shooting started, both hip draw users died in their chairs with their guns still holstered. All 3 cross-draw users survived, 2 wounded but functional. The entire fight lasted maybe 3 seconds. The hip draw users couldn't even access their weapons before they were shot. Position mattered more than skill, more than courage, more than anything except the physics of where they kept their guns. The retention advantage. At extreme close range, most gunfights became wrestling matches almost immediately. Weapon retention. Keeping your gun when someone grabs for it often determines survival more than draw speed. The cross-draw offers superior retention mechanics because of leverage. When someone grabs your gun during a cross-draw, they're reaching across your body, usually with their weak hand, fighting against your pulling motion toward your chest. You have your whole body working to retain the weapon. When someone grabs a hip-drawn gun, they're grabbing on your strong side with their strong hand. They can use body weight to push the weapon down or away from you. The leverage favors them, not you. Ben Thompson, the Austin gambler, survived 7 documented close-range fights that involved physical contact. In all 7, opponents tried to grab his weapon. All 7 times, Thompson retained his gun and killed his attacker. Thompson used cross-draw exclusively and later wrote that pulling the gun toward his chest meant winning every retention fight. Dallas Stoudenmeier, the El Paso marshal who used a hip holster, died in 1882 during a fight that became a grappling match. His opponent grabbed Stoudenmeier's gun during the draw, pushed it downward, and shot him with a second weapon. The hip holster gave the opponent the leverage advantage that killed him. The telegraph that kills. There's a psychological dimension at very close distances that often matters more than raw speed. Human perception is tuned to certain movements, especially those linked to threat. When a hand drops straight to the hip, it matches a deeply ingrained visual cue, the classic signal of drawing a weapon. Even people with no formal training tend to recognize it instantly. That recognition triggers reflexive action rather than conscious thought. The body reacts before the mind finishes processing, ducking, lunging forward, rushing to grab, or attempting to draw in response. At distances measured in feet rather than yards, those reflexes are dangerously fast. A sudden forward surge or grab can cover the space almost immediately, collapsing the gap before a draw is complete. In that context, the issue isn't just how fast a weapon can be brought into play, but whether the initial movement provokes an explosive response in the first place. The cross-draw motion alters that equation by changing what the opponent's brain thinks it is seeing. Instead of a sharp, downward reach, the hand moves inward toward the center of the body. Visually, this overlaps with many non-threatening actions: adjusting clothing, protecting the torso, or making a natural defensive gesture. That ambiguity introduces hesitation. The observer has to interpret what's happening rather than reacting automatically. Even a brief moment of uncertainty can interrupt an otherwise immediate charge. John Wesley Hardin wrote about this effect from personal experience. After narrowly surviving a close encounter in which his hip draw prompted an opponent to rush him, he reassessed his approach. He later described how a visible reach to the hip provoked an almost animal response, while a movement across the front of the body forced the other man to think. According to Hardin, that pause, created by uncertainty rather than speed. The cross draw's advantages overwhelmed the hip draw's speed. Earlier muzzle orientation, defensive positioning during the draw, accessibility while seated, better weapon retention, less obvious telegraphing, these factors mattered more than saving a tenth of a second. The statistics prove it. Cross-draw users survived close-range encounters at dramatically higher rates. The technique wasn't faster, but it was deadlier where it mattered, in the close-range chaos where most violence actually happened. If this breakdown of real gunfighting physics fascinated you, subscribe now, because I've got videos coming on the shoulder holster's advantages, why the ankle draw worked in specific situations, and the truth about Wild West accuracy that will shock you. This channel destroys Hollywood myths with historical facts.